Good morning, Making Moves family. We're back. Oh, Tim, we got the shirts on today. We didn't coordinate this, different colors,
Wait,
but same thought process.
yeah. Hey, I figured it was a making moves on Tuesday, so let's do it, right? Let's show up with our making move shirts on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good call. Good call. It's all about branding, right? Brand recognition.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So this week we're going to talk about some tough decisions that we had to make. This week, well, really last week was not an easy week, and it's an ongoing process of making tough decisions and having difficult conversations. So we wanted to talk about that. Actively managing syndications is not an easy job. It's not a passive job. I know Tim Vest, you love to talk about how managing deals is not passive. If I remember a couple months ago, we had a whole show about managing deals because you had a couple trees come down and some just one thing after another. It always seems to be that way.
Yeah, it's always funny when folks are kind of like, I'm gonna buy something, I'm gonna hand it to my property manager and be done, right?
I'm gonna forget
Um,
about it at that point.
yeah, that is not at all how it works. That's I learned that with the single family stuff. Um, I'm certainly seeing that, same thing with the multifamily stuff. And, obviously multifamily scales better. Um, but you have to stay on top of your property management team. And then there's things that you as an owner, especially if you're syndicating and you have investors, that you owe it to your investors to manage and stay on top of.
Hmm.
And and as as it scales, your work scales.
Yep.
So keep that in mind too. Um,
Yep. Well, perfect segue here into one of the first decisions that we had to make. It was really like 2 weeks ago, but the transition officially took place on October 1st. But we own a property that we had hired a new property management company when we took it over because it was in a new market. We had taken some recommendations from people in the market, and right before we closed on the property, they had called, like, literally 3 days before we were closing. They're like, "Hey, just wanted to let you know that we let these guys go." And we were too far in bed in order to go and change property management companies 3 days before closing. But I paid specific attention to the things that they had called out, and we had mitigated some of those risks, and we had difficult conversations, and it was a lot of coaching, and managing the manager in order to get the business, the pro forma, what's the word, the business goals
yeah,
accomplished, the
yeah,
objectives accomplished. And I paid very close attention to that stuff to make sure that everything is going on track. And for the first 4 to 6 months, it was going pretty well. I mean, renovations were going a little slower than we had anticipated, but we were getting the rents that we needed to get. The renovation costs were starting to come down because we had targeted the worst units first, and everything looked good. But around the end of July, we started finishing some of the renovations on these properties, and they just were sitting vacant. They couldn't get them leased. It was one excuse after another, and it turned into really bad conversation really quickly because we were very thin to begin with. Going through this value add process, taking our rents from 450, 500, 550 up to like 975, and they were sitting vacant. So everything mattered. We needed to get money in the door. And it was on top of them, we were coming up with new business strategies, we're offering new concessions, we were changing a million different things, and then it happened. They started to say, we got to decrease the rental rates. And that was the huge red flag for me, because that's what the other guys that had recommended these guys to begin with were like, "Hey, we're firing them because of this."
right.
And ultimately, all of us on here that are syndicators or commercial real estate investors know that the property value is based off of its NOI. And if we start reducing what we're going to rent these for, then it reduces the property value. And we just simply couldn't have that.
Well, and Tim, can you because sometimes, right? Like sometimes our property managers do come to us and they tell us, "Hey, I know you're trying to get here, but we really need to be here," right?
Mhm.
So, what was the difference on this one? Like, why were you like, no, uh, yeah,
Because when we bought this place, we had walked a property, that was literally like 200 yards down the road from this place. And
Right.
that was a year ago, and they were getting $968 a month plus the $35 bill back. And they're saying our property couldn't get that. And I was like, "You're kidding. You're out of your mind." Because a year ago, a place that was in worse condition than ours was getting these rents already. So that was my red flag of like, hey, like this just isn't working. We threw out a bunch of different concession numbers, and we tried a million different things, and they just couldn't get it rented. And I don't want to say it was for lack of effort. It was definitely they were trying. They were trying very hard, but it just wasn't a good fit. It's not you, it's me.
Right.
Scenario had to come up. And because somebody else had recommended them to us, and then had told us what to watch out for, and then we started hitting all the same red flags. I was like, boom, all right, we got to pivot to somebody else. And truthfully, maybe I waited a little too long to make that transition, but we had to honor the terms that were in the contract, and we made the decision to do it, and we transferred everything over as of October 1st. And the new guys are coming in, and I don't know if it's just because they're newer in the market or they just are better apartment property managers, but everybody in this market that has switched from this company A to company B has been very, very, very happy with going with company B.
Yeah, and folks, kind of back to the question there, right? And I admit I threw Tim a little bit of a softball, but the issue there is sometimes property managers, it's not for lack of work, it's not because they aren't trying, it's that they aren't familiar with the tenant base, or maybe that particular area of town or something like that. Because like Tim, we had something in another city
Hmm.
that a similar issue, right? And it wasn't that they were having a hard time filling units, and they were having a hard time filling units for what, quite frankly, was still a discount to that market.
Yep.
Like there's places nearby getting 1550, 1600, and we were asking 1450,
Hmm.
and they were having a hard time getting it. And we're like, what's going on? And when we finally dug into it, it wasn't for lack of trying, it's that one, they weren't familiar with this specific kind of tenant base, and then two, because of that, they weren't trying in the right places.
Yeah.
Like where they were trying to solicit tenants and find tenants, these tenants don't live or
Hmm.
exist or pay attention to.
Yep.
Um, and ultimately, that was a scenario where it's like we had to make a change because obviously these guys don't know this particular tenant profile or this area. Um, and sure enough, right after we made the change, we had our biggest leasing window. I think we had 8 leases come up in like 2 months, and we filled 7 of the 8 at market, our market, like that.
Yep.
Um,
I'm
so
hoping I'm hoping that's the case. We haven't had our first like call yet because they're still working on transferring the mortgage and the insurance, and all the deposits with the electrical company and the water company and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, what Tim Vest is mentioning is like they were, as an example, I'm not saying that this is the example for this specific property, but as an example, the property management company could have been marketing on Craigslist, and these types of tenants don't look on Craigslist for rentals,
exactly,
right?
yeah,
And it's not to say that they can't use Craigslist or effectively, or any of the other outlets like Zillow or apartments.com or Facebook Marketplace or whatever, right? It's not to say that you can't use those correctly and effectively. It's just didn't work for that property management company with those types of people, for the people that they're used to targeting. And that's okay. And we had a really good conversation. And I talked to the owner of the company. I was like, look, man, like, I know that you own property as well. And this is a business that I have to run. And it's not for lack of effort on either side, but I have to try something different because we got another 14 months until we can refinance this place. And the track record that we're going on over the last 60 to 90 days is not going to get us there. So I have to try something else. And I told him, I was like, I don't know if this is the right decision or not, but I have to try something and have to pivot and do something different because what we're doing right now is not working. So,
yeah,
it's a tail between the legs. I really had, for everything, I really hoped that it was going to work out successfully, but it didn't. But it was a really difficult conversation and I had to have it. And it's a lot of work on me right now. I mean, we're in the middle of closing another deal and traveling. And I spoke at the 2 events over the last 2 weeks. So a lot of mastermind events, going to another one in California next week. So I'm all over the place right now. And then adding a transition of property management companies is not easy, but it was what's necessary. And the most important part of being a syndicator and having a fiduciary responsibility to your investors is doing whatever it takes no matter what. And
Yeah.
if that means I got to stay up and work 10, 12-hour days and, answer emails and do whatever I need to at nighttime on top of what I'm doing during the day, fine. So be it. Like that's what I have to do in order, to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and my investors.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And, that's one of the reasons I partner with this guy is because he is willing to do that. And so, like when I do passive investments as well, that's one of the things I look for is, what is that guy handing everything off, or are they willing when the shit hits the fan, are they willing to step in and get their hands dirty if they need to?
Hmm.
And if the answer to that one's yes, then yeah, I'll take a look at your deal. If the answer is no, you're just going to rely on everybody else to do it. Then probably not.
Yeah. And then it's okay to not be that person either. Just make sure you're partnering with somebody that is.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's kind of why I raise my hand and I kind of take over a lot of the asset management roles because I'm willing to do that. I have no problem having difficult conversations like that and asking operational questions. I mean, I managed a team of people for my W-2 job. So it just kind of works, right? It was something that it comes more naturally to me, I feel like, because of my experience in the corporate world, but it's ultimately what has to be done. And I don't think enough people talk about how difficult it can be to do that kind of stuff. Everything is always rah rah, like we closed another deal, this one's amazing, this one's epic, but like, okay, well, what about all the deals we closed about a year ago? How are those going? Are we tracking? Are we going to meet our targets? Are there things that are going wrong? And there's stuff going wrong all the time. We're fixing it, but we don't document every single thing. But I
yeah,
think that this is a I would call this like a life event. I would, we firing a property management company is like, moving states. It's a big undertaking. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Packing up everything at your current house and then moving to another house and unpacking it again. Like moving is a very stressful subject and activity. So is changing property management companies. It is literally something that I did not want to do. I'm like, this is going to create so much work, but it has to be done. So we did it.
yeah, and yeah, and and it goes beyond property management companies as well. I mean, it does. Things create work. For instance, we closed on something recently, and hey, what am I doing this afternoon? Hey, this wasn't in the plan. I'm hopping in the car. I'm headed to that city. I'm going to spend the night and doing things tonight. And I'm getting up tomorrow morning, and I'm going down to meet with the city. I'm going down to meet with architects and stuff because, quite frankly, some of the answers that we're getting are not answers that work, quite frankly.
Mhm.
So we're going to go down there. We're going to get face to face with folks, and we're going to get the answers that make this work.
We're going to
Um,
crush
you know,
some skulls and get the answers we want. Knock them
and
around a little bit.
yeah, and sometimes, and I'm a big technology guy, so I love using technology. But sometimes, folks, it really comes down to face, getting
Mhm.
face to face with somebody, and having a conversation. Like for instance, where this project is taking place. Um, one of our partners showed up at the office this morning. Showed up at the office this morning with donuts. We had been told, nah, you need to schedule a meeting. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get you in, stuff like that. We were like, nah, nah, that's not the way that's going to work. So, hey, go down there with donuts this morning. Talk to the talk to the secretary. See if you can't get past the gatekeeper. And next thing you know, before 9 a.m. this morning, our partners were on a phone call with the person we needed to talk with. We're headed there tomorrow to have a follow up conversation. So, sometimes you just got to drop what you're doing and get there and make sure that you're, hitting the business plan. So,
Man, so I'm from New England, and Dunkin' Donuts is everything up in New England. And my God, you can get far with a box of Munchkins. I'll tell you that much.
yeah, it's great. Did we have to pay any fees when you fired them?
No, good question.
Yeah, I'll let Tim speak to the one he's talking about. The other one that I mentioned, yes, we did have to pay an exit fee.
Ooh,
And and yeah, and it depends, right? It depends on your contract. So always refer to your contract. We did have to pay an exit fee on one, but sometimes it's worth it. Um, so I'll give you an example. On that one, we paid the exit fee. We were still able to hit the pref. Had we not made the change, we would not have hit the pref in that quarter. So even with the exit fee, making the change, we were still able to get the rents where they needed to be in the next 2 months that we hit the pref for the quarter, and now we're exceeding. So I'll let Tim speak to the other one.
Yeah, no, good point. Always refer back to the contract. In the contract, it said that we had to give 60-day notice to fire without cause. Um, when I had that conversation with them, they were like, "Hey, look, like actually, we realize it's not working on our side either." And they didn't say we didn't have to pay anything additional or extra. They actually came out and told me, they were like, hey, of all of the work that we've had to do because of all the construction and the time and everything, she was like, on our P&L, we've made $20 off your property. So we did them a favor by getting rid of the property because it wasn't a good fit for them and it turned out not to be a good fit for us. So now we got another year and a half in order to turn this place around, and I really have confidence that these new guys are going to be able to do it because of all of the experience and the recommendations that they came with. So I feel really confident about it. But yeah, we didn't have to pay anything. Again, when you go to sign your property management contracts, like read through that with a fine tooth comb, because I know one of
Yeah.
our other business partners is really good with reading contracts and things like that. And I read it just as like a once through, and I caught something that he didn't catch. So look, at the end of the day, nobody's perfect. And Tim and I, we screw up purchase and sale agreements all the time. And we miss things and we forget about things, or we didn't understand it correctly. The same thing happens on term sheets and on property management contracts. Like both there should be more than one person that reads these things in order to make sure, like, hey, did we both agree that this is saying the same thing? Because you might catch something or not, or vice versa. And I think it's always good to have a second set of eyeballs on anything that you're legally bound to.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And here's another lesson learned over the years, and every now and then I still continue to learn. This one is, speaking of PSAs and management contracts and things like that, guys, make sure it's in the contract. Make
Hmm.
sure it is or isn't in the contract, depending on which side you want to be on. But I'm just continue to find out that somebody saying, no matter how many times you've worked with them, somebody saying, um, if we get to that point, we'll figure something out. If we get to
Yeah,
that point, we'll
no, no,
figure
no,
something
no.
out. Like,
Mm-mm,
no, no,
mm-mm.
you know what? Because I can tell you, like, I've had conversations where it has been, hey, if we get to that point, we'll figure something out. It's like, okay, cool, let's shake, we're good, right? And we got to that point, and the person said, "Is it in the contract?"
Yep.
So get it in the contract.
Yeah.
No
Yeah, no,
matter
no.
how good
Let's
of
figure
friends
that
you
out
are.
right now. Not when
Yeah,
we get there. Let's figure hypothetically, if that happens, let's figure out the solution right now. I'm actually doing that. I'm talking to a guy that wants me to do some private lending, and I asked him a question. Didn't really answer it, but I asked him it again, and because I want to know the answer to that now, right? And I want to make sure that it's in the contract and understood. And it's not a huge sum of money, but hey, it's still money at the end of the day. And I want to know now, what are the hypotheticals of what could potentially happen. So it doesn't matter if you're negotiating a purchase and sale agreement, or a property management agreement, or a term sheet with a bank, or an insurance policy, whatever. You really should have two sets of eyes on it.
yeah, agreed. And hey, can't reiterate that enough. Yeah, best advice is just get it in writing. Um,
Hmm.
you know, it because I've had conversations with guys in the past, and they're like, "What? You don't trust me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I trust you, but let's get it in writing so we don't
Yeah,
forget." Right?
yeah. I like
Um,
you too, but when push comes to shove, what's the judge going to say? And you can't argue, you can't refute that response. Well, the judge is going to say it's not in the contract, it didn't happen. So I'm going with that.
Yeah. So, and here's a good one. Answer to that question is emphatic yes.
Oh yeah.
Have do we recommend basically interviewing more than one PM? 100% yes. Ideally, my sweet spot's three.
Hmm.
I like to talk to three. Typically, we if it's in a market we don't know folks, we tend to get recommendations. We'll look at them. We'll narrow it down to three. We'll interview the three. We'll pick our one, and then we always have kind of a backup as, hey,
Hmm.
if we make a bad decision, who are we going to? Who are we going to go back to? And again, we've done that a couple of times, right?
Hmm.
And actually, I think it's three times now, right? Um,
Yes. Yeah. This is the third property management company we've had to fire.
Yeah, so we've done that 3 times, and every time we knew where we were going after once we made that decision. We knew where
Mhm.
we were going next. So yeah, always have a backup, guys.
Yep. All right. So that was one thing that we had to do, and we're in the process of, and we got 1 quarter left in the year. So let's see if they can, start to make some improvements on the properties and to start to turn things around. And we'll hit it. Now, they'll give them 90 days to get used to the property and the tenant base and have everything set up, et cetera, and so forth. Then come January time, we're back to renovating. We're getting units back online. We're coming into the leasing season. Like, everything is I'm thinking about next May and next June, right? So I'm like, what is that, 9 months ahead of where I'm making decisions today that's going to affect my business and this property 9 months from now, right? I think you have, and hell, I mean, we were talking about refinancing properties that aren't going to hit the refinance till August or September of next year, but we're having that conversation 10, 12 months advance now so that we have an understanding that we make sure that we hit our business plans so that we track and hit exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. You got to be looking down the road to understand how to.
Mhm.
I mean, it's right. What's the analogy, right? Like, you got to be looking at where you're trying to go to understand how to get there.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
yeah, so you got to know where you want to be in 6 months to understand exactly what you need to be doing today, and if things get a little off track, how to pivot and get it back on track. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what Tim's talking about. We know where we need to be in 6 months. This wasn't working out, so we need to adjust and pull it back in and get it back on the road to getting to where we need to be 6 months from now.
Oh,
Um, how do you feel about PMs that own property? I actually, my experience, I actually like it. I haven't had any issues where I felt like they were putting the best tenants in their units. That's just been my experience, and my experience with PMs who own property has been typically that, hey, at least they understand owning property, so they understand where I'm coming from when I talk to them about things. So yeah, I haven't run into that issue, and maybe, guys, part of that is that there is such a um, undersupply of units that maybe there's just more tenants than anybody can take. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I haven't quite run into that issue yet.
mhm.
Tim. I don't know about you.
No, I think it's good. I prefer a property management company that owns as well because they understand the business plan. Um, do they put the best in their units? Potentially. So just buy in a better market. So then you have all good tenants. No. I like to live a life of abundance, and there are more than one good tenant out there. So as
Yeah,
long as my property is achieving the business plan, then I'm okay with it. Right. Now, it is what it is, right? There's pros and cons, there's, trade-offs and this, that, and the other thing. But look, at the end of the day, if we're meeting the numbers and we're hitting the business plan, I'm good with it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Good PMs are the unicorn in commercial real estate. That's funny. Um, I I don't know. I had a buddy in college who told me, relationships don't end when things are good, right? So
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that sentiment. But I have been married for almost 22 years, and I don't know. That seems to be going okay. Maybe I should bring her in and ask her, at the current moment. But that seems to be going okay. So I I here's what I would say to that. Here's what I would say to that. I think that's kind of a negative view. I would hate to think that every partnership that I have is going to end poorly in some way. Um, I'll take a little more optimistic view on that. But that's just me.
Hmm. Yeah, good point. So next, we got how much is too much rehab on a multifamily property? And I can literally tell you that I sent a text at 9:32 this morning and said I'm not doing a deal. It was an 8 unit that a broker friend of mine brought to me. One unit was occupied, so yeah, so it was pretty rough shape. But he wanted 400 grand for it, and it probably needed about 400 and for another 400 that 350 to $400,000 of construction plus 50 to 75K of holding costs. And to me, that's too much rehab for me. If I have to put in more work than the purchase price of the property, it's probably too much rehab because banks are going to look at it that way too. They're going to say, "Wait a second, you're putting more money into this place than it's even worth." That's a really risky job. And it also depends on your experience level, your comfort level, how close you are to the property, what connections you have with construction. Like, do you have a GC that you can rely on no matter what? And there's different risk appetites for each investor. For me, that was too much risk for me. Now, it might make sense for somebody else that owns their own construction company, and that's a breeze. That's no problem. They'll be able to do things at cost, and they won't have as much holding cost because they are the GC on the property. Or maybe they want to buy it in cash. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios here, but at the end of the day, you have to adjust your risk
Yeah.
tolerance based on your own experience and comfort level.
Yeah, and I was gonna you went back to it, and I was gonna say that it's very individual, right? Like,
Hmm.
like for instance, Tim and I knew two guys in Cincinnati that if somebody walked up to them with that deal, they
Oh,
jump
they
on
would
it
do it all
all
day. Oh
day
yeah,
long,
that's their
because
wheelhouse.
right, they know that market, they have the experience to do it. They would take that on all day long, and but I'm not interested in a lift like that right now.
Mm-mm.
So it's not the right deal for me either. So it's kind of a very case by case personal question. If really, I mean, I would say the only time it becomes an absolute, this is too much is like when the purchase price and the amount of rehab is more than what you can ultimately sell it for. I would say
Yeah, because I want to
that's
do
a
all
no.
that work to break even. Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. But for the most part,
Yeah,
I think that question is kind of a personal case
yeah.
by case question.
Yeah, for me, on that deal that I'm thinking about, for me to do that deal, I would have had to pay cash and then bring on an investor to fund the rehab and do it all cash. But I would have to make sure that there was at least, I want to be 70% all in of stabilized because I can get debt right now for 65 to 70% of stabilized value. And if I'm going to take on all that risk and all that, whatever, if I'm going to take on all that risk, I want to make sure that there's substantial meat on the bone for me. Otherwise, it's not worth my time and headache and effort.
Yeah, there better be at least a 5x multiple on something like that, don't you think?
Yeah,
Um,
easily. Like,
yeah.
set the bar, set the standard, set your own standards, right? I mean, I never lost money on a deal I didn't do. I like not having too much. I mean, I already got enough stress going on with our syndications. Why do I need to add this whole new stress of construction rehab risk for tight margins? Like, it doesn't even make sense.
Why are you stressing about your syndications? You have property managers. You just
Yeah, yeah. Just send it off, right? It doesn't really work that way. But yeah, all right. The other part of the show I wanted to talk about real quick because we got like 2.5, 3 minutes left. Tim, you want to talk about walking away from our deal a week or two ago and how why that was difficult and ultimately what maybe led you to those decisions?
um, you know, ultimately, I'll keep it high level, guys. But ultimately, what kind of led to the decision to walk away from a deal? It was just some red flags. I'll put it that way, and I'll explain that in 30 seconds or less. Just so to preface this piece is, Tim and I never ever put an LOI or sign a PSA on something that we don't fully intend to do. We never take anything under contract that we do not fully intend to close on at the price where we made the offer.
Hmm.
Um, Occasionally that will change just because we uncover something that wasn't disclosed or we uncovered something that nobody knew about. And it just changes the offer, it changes the deal price. So those are conversations that have to be had. But at the end of the day, we always go into the deal with full intentions of closing at the price that we put it under contract at. In this particular case, that price started to balloon based on our due diligence. I think our rehab budget almost doubled.
Yeah, it
Um,
basically doubled our rehab budget. So,
yeah, so but when we went back to kind of have discussions about that, we were asked to produce a lot of documentation on, what the actual rehab was going to be, line item invoice, line item estimates from third parties, which we did. We showed up and provided all of that. Um, And then what it ultimately came down to was kind of the negotiation during all of that. We had two pieces that we were very, very firm on. Like, hey, we can all debate the budget. That's up for grabs. But there's two pieces when it came down to, say, extensions and and things like that, where we were like, those are non-starters. We're not willing to budge on those because one of the things I think you guys have heard me say this before. One of the things 2008 taught me is time is your friend. Don't back yourself into a corner. And over the course of the negotiation, it started to feel more and more like there was a reason we were being backed into a corner. So ultimately, the team kind of got together and they were like, "We're not comfortable. We're not comfortable with this continued ask that feels like we're kind of getting backed into a corner where we have no options." Um, so ultimately, at the end of the day, literally, the team decided, I think there's something here that we haven't uncovered, even though our due diligence was as thorough as we've ever done.
Mhm.
I mean, it was a 2 weeks all hands on deck due diligence with third parties,
Mhm.
and I feel pretty confident that we uncovered most everything, but there's still just that little feeling based off the ask that maybe we hadn't. So for that reason, we kind of said, you know what, this we're going to get out.
Mhm.
And it was not easy, man. It was not easy. Like I want this. I really want to do this one.
Yeah, I
Um,
did too. I wanted to do this deal so bad. It was going to put us in a new league essentially. And there's real costs. Like we had to walk away from real money. Yeah, it was a gut feeling. Whoever this is, yeah, it was a gut feeling that it just wasn't meant to be. Something didn't feel right. Tim kept saying we keep getting backed into a corner. It feels like they're hiding something else, and that's why they want to hold us to these timelines. And because if we find it, then we don't have the time, like we're screwed. So we didn't want to back ourselves into a corner, but there's real costs there. Tim and I had to put up all the stuff for the due diligence and the inspections and everything that goes into that. Like there's real money that's lost. I don't even know. I mean, couple, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000, something like that. I don't know. That we have to lose essentially. Nobody wants to lose money, right? That's a rule. Rule number one from Warren Buffett is don't lose money. And I think a lot of other operators and investors, they lose sight of the fact that they don't even see these deals or get presented these deals until we know that they're good and we've already put up a ton of money. There's hard costs that we're not getting back no matter what. And then if a deal doesn't work out, we lose that money. And I think there's so much oversight on both sides here that you know losing money is a real thing of paying these types of costs and things and then having to walk away from it.
yeah. So two quick questions. Was it a gut feeling? I guess you could chalk it down to gut. I think
I think it was
I w-
experience more so than
yeah,
anything because that's what
yeah.
you
I was
kept
good.
coming up with.
Yeah, I was going to say it was more red flags from experience, right? Like little indicators that in the past these indicators have popped up before, and I didn't notice them. And there were some lessons to be learned there, and I think those are just lessons learned more than a gut feeling.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, 100% agree. I wish it was 5K in this case, but I do agree it's better to lose a little than a lot.
Hmm.
And in this case, yeah, I think we're gonna end up paying out, more than 5K. And but at the end of the day, we're not losing 10 million.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
but
yeah.
but
Good.
to Tim,
Good point.
but to Tim's point, you know, that's one of the things a lot of folks don't see about some of these deals that you do, right? Like you put money up as an operations team that you may
Mhm.
never see back, right? There's a risk involved with putting a property under contract,
Yep.
um, and you may never see that money back. And that's even if you're still in your due diligence period with no hard earnest money on the line, you're
Yeah.
going to still lose some money.
Hmm.
So just keep that in mind, guys, when you're looking to do these things.
Yep. Cool. All right, that's all the time we got for today. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody's comments and interaction. It really helps us provide value to you guys. If there's something that you want us to talk about, send either one of us a note, and we'll do a show on it. We'll talk about our experiences in whatever you're asking about, or if you're interested in being a guest on our show. We haven't had a guest in a while. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to either one of us again, and let's set it up. So without that, Tim, why don't you take us out?
Yeah. Hey, guys, have a great week. Continue to make some moves. Don't forget, join Vitaly and myself down in Atlanta, man. Some fast
Oh,
cars
yeah.
and some good speakers down there.
Oh, yeah, the Porsche
So
event, November
yeah,
18th and 19th.
race cars and real estate, guys.
Yeah,
So
man.
would
Gonna
love
be
to see
fun.
you there.
Cool. All right. See y'all later.
All right, bye, guys.